What is up, guys? Rick Kakas here, and today we are going to be discussing Anthem. Now, yesterday I reached level 30, the max level within the game, and I'm going to talk about that experience from the very beginning of the game. When you first log on, your first ever time, you're level 1, you've got nothing, and then the entire grind to get to level 30, the storyline along the way, the quality of the missions along the way, the quality of the loot drops along the way. Is it engaging? Is it boring? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. Now, just before we do, I am giving away an ASTRO A40 headset plus the mix amp. All you got to do to enter is follow me on Twitter at RickKakas so I can contact you if you win, and tweet at me something with the hashtag RangerRick because I'm loving the Ranger in Anthem. And that's it. Now, if you don't end up winning because I am partnered with ASTRO, check the link in the description down below. Clicking it will automatically apply a code, letting you save some money on any ASTRO purchase and help the channel out. Definition of a win-win. If you're new to the channel, you're probably like, wait, did this guy just do a giveaway on YouTube without begging for subscribers and likes? That's how we do it here. Alright, now let's talk about Anthem. Now, upon starting the game, one of the first things you're going to experience is a ton of stuff just thrown at you with little to no explanation. I feel like this game doesn't do a good enough job of explaining what exactly is going on. Not necessarily in the story, but a great example is detonating combos, a huge part of Anthem's combat. There is really no breakdown screen that says, okay, this is a primer skill. It'll inflict a status effect on enemies, and then you use a detonation skill, this is a detonation skill, to trigger that combo and to do more damage and to apply other bonuses depending on what javelin you're playing. There's none of that stuff. So if you are planning on playing, guys, I would highly recommend you watch my video on the best class to choose for you. I go over that stuff, and I also go over stuff like the fact that if you're playing the Storm specifically and you detonate a combo, you're going to spread that status effect to other enemies. Again, this stuff is very useful to know, but isn't explained in-game, and that can definitely cause some confusion. Now, the good news is that if you're not detonating combos, you're still going to be able to function in the game, and you're still going to be able to kill enemies. In fact, the game worked in a way such that certain skills that don't have anything to do with combos, they're not primers or detonator skills, they're going to inflict more damage than normal. So going with a combo-less build or having a skill that doesn't detonate combos or doesn't prime combos might actually be the right approach in certain scenarios. So it's not horrendous, I just feel like it needs to do a better job of explaining some of the cooler features of the game. Now, something that is really cool is that once you reach level 2, after the tutorial basically, you get to select your starting javelin. So you don't actually have to start with the Ranger and then switch off of it, which a lot of people did think that was going to be the case, but you get to start with the Interceptor, with the Storm, with the Colossus, whatever you want to start with, which is great. And in terms of the story, well, there's definitely some complication and confusion about what's going on, but that seems to really be intended, and things do unfold quite nicely within the first few missions. Now, we kind of have this lack of explanation again because when you're trying to do the campaign, you have these different missions. You have critical objective missions, and then you have contract missions, and then you have character missions. You have all these different type of missions, and sometimes it can be confusing on which mission to actually do in order to progress the main storyline. You can be doing some character missions or contract missions and then go, oh, wait a minute, I need to go do this mission. Or sometimes the main storyline almost requires you to do some extra missions in order to progress the main storyline. So it is a little confusing about which direction you should go in, but with that being said, as a whole, I found the storyline to be quite good. Now, I'm going to really try to keep this spoiler-free here, but essentially, you know, the cutscenes were excellent. Like, the voice acting and the cutscenes were unbelievably good for this type of game. It blows something like Destiny, like Division, out of the water.
Medeiros was the son of arcanists. He had lived his entire life in a cavern underground, hiding. At 10 years old, he had never seen the sky or an Urgoth or any beast but men. The world was utterly unknown to him, except for tales of horror and woe.
And I felt like there was some very good instances within the narrative and character development and so on. I got to a point where I was legitimately playing the next mission not to level up, but to find out what happened next in the storyline. And that is very, very good. especially with the characters. Again, trying to remain spoiler free, what I'm going to say is that we actually have three-dimensional characters, not characters like you find in most video games where, hey, you're evil and you're always evil and you're the big bad guy and yeah, you're evil. And then you're good, you have no character flaws and you're good, you're the good guy. Like, that's what you find way too much, but in Anthem, they really actually have interesting, evolving characters that are really, really well written. Now, with that all being said, this is not like the best storyline in any video game I've ever played, but it is very good. And if you are interested in the story, this, I do believe, will captivate a lot of people. And additionally, the lore in this game seems to be pretty abundant and also quite interesting. You're going to get little pieces of information about the world as a whole and things outside the main storyline, especially when you're doing like contract missions and side missions. And there's also a million different things you can find around the world as, you know, points of interest, codex entries and stuff like that. I feel like the lore in this game is actually pretty darn flushed out. It's going to be interesting to see people start to put these things together and kind of predict the outcome of maybe future DLCs or just what's going to happen in the world of Anthem. That's going to be really cool as well. But, you know, a game can't necessarily just rest on the story, which I do feel like was quite good. You gotta play the game. So how was the gameplay? Well, like I've said, the narrative in the missions is interesting, but the actual gameplay can be somewhat lacking. By the end of the storyline, when you're doing missions, you get the feeling of, I've kind of done this. There is definitely a lot of very similar missions. Go here, defend this area, like stand near this thing, kill enemies. Okay, go here, recover these echoes, plant in this thing. Okay, now go here, pick up these fragments. Okay, you're done. And then the next mission will be the opposite order. Pick up fragments, and then, you know, get echoes, and then stand here, or something like that, right? And you definitely start to recognize by the point when you're, I would say, level 20, going to level 30, you kind of get that feeling of like, oh, another one of these, and that is not great. But I will say at the same time, there is a huge abundance of missions to do. I reached level 30, I think I was level like 28, 29, before I actually ran out of missions. I got to the point where I was like, geez, like this storyline with Matthias is still going. We got another contract. I've got another mission. Oh my goodness. There is a lot of different missions to do in the game, which is great. My worry was that you'd reach level 25, let's say, and you'd have to do 25 to 30 just grinding strongholds or free play, and the missions will have totally run out. That really doesn't seem to be the case in Anthem. I do think that's a very good thing. Now, there are a couple of points within that campaign where you're not going to necessarily be doing missions. You have these very long objectives to complete. There's one where you have to go to all these 4 different tombs. I'm going to do a guide on how to do that faster at a later date, but it just involves you doing a bunch of public events, basically, finding a bunch of chests and so on. So that's just grinding play time to do that. But it really just feels like the game's telling you, hey, stop playing missions for a sec, check out Freeplay. And it doesn't really feel as ridiculously grindy as some people I think are making it out to be. And it's just gonna let you spend more time in the game doing different things in the game. Now let's actually talk about Freeplay, because again, you're basically required to do it at a certain point, you know, during the campaign. Aside from that, you're really not. You can just grind missions basically until you are max level. But Freeplay, some people are claiming it's boring, and I can see where they're coming from. If you're grinding Freeplay for quite a while, it does definitely get tedious. The world events aren't that different from one another, and the cool stuff like finding Titans and finding Ursics, well, that's kind of it. Like, those are the big bad boss enemies that you're gonna face. Titans and Ursics, and that's about it. Otherwise, it's just groups of the enemies you've already been facing with the same objectives you've already been doing. Getting the echoes and putting them into a thing, getting fragments and putting them into a shaper relic, or just holding out an area and killing enemies. Like, you're going to be doing that a lot. But if you look a little closer and don't just come into Freeplay with an already negative opinion, there is some definite charm to the world of Anthem. There's a lot of moments when you're looking down on a huge area, you're on like a mountain or you're on a spire and you're looking down and you're like, wait a minute, I can go anywhere there. I can just go, I can fly to that thing I'm seeing in the distance. And that's such a cool thing that most other games do not have. And Anthem, because it has this flight system, You know, it can't do the usual tricks that other games do of making free play areas seem bigger than they are and having all these different load areas and, you know, all these different areas disguised behind walls and stuff, and it's actually not that big of an area and all that stuff. Anthem has to have an open world because you have to be able to fly to all these different places. So that is cool. And again, if you look a little closer and you're interested in the lore of the world and you're collecting all those codexes and those lookouts and stuff, there is some stuff to do for sure. But I think BioWare really needs to increase the frequency of world events, potentially make them a little bit more difficult, make them more dynamic, and some of the best world events have you going into the caves of Anthem and fighting stuff in there, but those really rarely happen. Like, you can be out in free play for 3 hours and not get a single one of those, and BioWare really needs to increase them. They're some of the coolest events. So if you're not doing the ones where you go into the caves, you're gonna get a little bit more bored than if you were. Alright, now let's talk about what happens to your character when you're experiencing all of this. How is the loot? How is the progression? Well, in terms of loot, you're going to be getting white and green rarity stuff up to level 10. As soon as you're level 10, you can start getting blues all the way up to when you're level 20. As soon as you're level 20, you can start getting purples. And then I actually got my first masterwork at level 26. I thought it was going to be 30, but you can start getting masterworks around maybe the level 25 mark. They're pretty rare because the hardest difficulty you can do is hard. There's easy, medium, and hard for everything until you get to level 30, and then once you're level 30, you unlock Grandmaster 1, Grandmaster 2, and Grandmaster 3. So, is that a good system? Well, it's pretty simplistic, and it's definitely not bad, but I wish there was a little bit more bleed over instead of these very harsh cutoffs, especially with purples. The fact that you start getting them at level 20, like, once you start getting purples, in only a few more levels, you're going to get masterworks, and then that's all you're looking for. So I feel like maybe dial back the purples into level 17, 18, and then masterworks, again, they can stay level 25 plus. There's some pretty minor changes I would make, but it's really not a horrible loot system. And the loot grind in the game does feel quite satisfying, especially because as you keep leveling up, your character is going to get undeniably better because you're going to keep unlocking components, which are basically just bonuses you can put on your character. And depending on what class you're playing, you can get vastly different components. For example, the Ranger has a component where you can get 25% increased gun damage. Like, think of how big of a boost that is. And yeah, you just put it on, but if you're playing the Interceptor, it can't actually get that. You know, if you're playing the Storm, it can't actually get that. The Storm is going to get a bonus to elemental damage, for example. The Ranger can't get that. So depending on what character you're playing, you can get these big bonuses. And we're talking big bonuses. Like a 25% straight increase to gun damage is nuts. And then as you keep leveling up, you're going to unlock, you know, your first component slot, then your second, and all the way up to 6. And 6 different slots for these major bonuses feels quite good. Like, again, with the Ranger example, your first slot takes up the 25% weapon damage. As soon as you unlock that second slot, you can put a different mod on that, for example, also for the Ranger, increases your grenade recharge rate by 35%. Then your next slot, maybe you increase your thruster life by 35% so you can fly further. Then your next slot, you've got ones that increase the impact damage but lower the blast damage and stuff like that. It really does feel great when you're unlocking those different components and getting more and more and more powerful. And getting the loot itself does feel good. Like, once you start to get your first blues, that feels great. Once you get, you know, a blue or whatever the relevant gear type is of your favorite skill, that's a great feeling as well. Like, if you love Seeker Missile for the Ranger, you keep getting this other stuff, then you finally get a blue Seeker Missile, that's the best level it can be. You're like, yes, put it on. And you noticeably increase in power when you do stuff like that. When you get your first purple, it feels great. And once you start getting Masterworks, it's nuts. Like, the difference between blues and purples, there's definitely, you know, a noticeable difference. Purples are definitely more powerful. But once you go from purples to Masterworks, it is a huge difference. It is an astronomical difference. For example, my first Masterwork was this here. It's a little machine pistol, 1,000 rounds per minute, but it has a perk that if I'm point blank range, which actually isn't so point blank, I can be like 10 feet away and it still works, it's gonna double my damage. Double the damage of this weapon. It out DPS'd every single purple I had. Purples became irrelevant as soon as I got this. Then I got this shotgun here. Reload It increases the damage by 150%. So you can shoot, reload, reload, stacks up to 2 times, so I can have 300% more damage after 2 reloads. And then you can just keep going shoot, reload, and just melt enemies. It's unbelievably good. But it's not just those special abilities, the stats also grow exponentially. We've had people in my group, and I got a shotgun, a Masterwork shotgun for example, with a stat, those little prefix lines of text, the attunements or whatever they're called, the inscriptions I should say, those little lines of text on my shotgun, it said plus 150% weapon damage. Think of how insane that is. 150% more damage because of that inscription. So if I didn't get that, it'd be doing less than half the damage. So the rolls you get really, really do matter. But the cool thing is that once you get a Masterwork, and once you kill legendaries, like you go out and you kill legendary enemies, once you've killed enough, you're going to get a blueprint for that Masterwork, and it's going to let you keep crafting it. So if you get the shotgun you want, but it doesn't have 150% weapon damage increase, you can keep crafting it until you can get it. And I think that is a great system of, you know, getting a weapon, being able to slay out on legendaries, which you can lower it to hard and you'll still find legendaries not that hard, and then being able to try to get like the perfect roll for it. That's a pretty awesome system. But as cool as it is and as fun as it actually has been leveling up in the end game, like getting every Masterwork is really a great feeling, and doing those first Grandmaster missions and stuff like that, it feels awesome. But it is a quite jarring experience, that massive jump in the quality of your loot from purples to Masterworks in the end game. And once you do get in the end game, there's another like colossal jump from hard to Grandmaster 1 is insane. From Grandmaster 1 to Grandmaster 2 is like, you can't even comprehend it. And Grandmaster 3, like, you're gonna have to be so unbelievably geared to do Grandmaster 3. It's actually crazy. So it is quite a spike near the tail end, and everything up to that point was a pretty smooth transition. So do expect that. However, again, it is a cool feeling, and there's nothing wrong with staying in hard for a little bit, getting a few Masterworks, getting geared up, and then finally being ready for Grandmaster. Alright, so how was my experience overall from starting the game to getting to max level? Well, this game is not without its negatives. The missions can definitely get tedious and repetitive by the end especially. Things just are not explained well enough to you as they should be, and things sometimes are overly complicated, especially the menu system and how to navigate that. Even inviting friends can be somewhat annoying. The fact that you can't join friends is definitely annoying, so the interfaces need some work as well. In addition to that, we have the glitches. Now, some people are experiencing like unbelievable glitches. For me, like the first day, the game crashed once or twice, I believe, and my audio cut out a few times. The second day, none of that happened. The game didn't crash once, my audio didn't cut out at all. The third day, my audio cut out again, but my game never crashed. So, like, that's the thing about this game. Some people are gonna have crashes, are gonna have their audio cut out, are gonna have these annoying bugs and stuff, and that does detract from your experience quite a bit. Others, like myself, are gonna get to go through pretty unscathed. Again, that second day I played a lot and I had no glitches, nothing. It was just a normal day of playing and it was great. But obviously, you need to have your game polished to a state where you're not crashing, where your audio isn't cutting out, where, I mean, an example for me, I got downed at the last second of the very final mission just as my teammates killed the boss, and I had the revive screen up for the entirety of the final cutscene of the game. Like, come on, BioWare, what are you doing with that? Aside from the glitches, there's also optimization issues. For example, load screens take forever unless you put all 50 gigs of this game on an SSD drive. And stuff like enemies won't load in sometimes until you're already damaged by them, like this example you're seeing right here. I literally died before I could even see what was shooting at me. Stuff like that will happen occasionally as well. But the thing is, for all these negatives, somewhere in this game, it's still incredibly fun to play, in my opinion. It's fun joining up with your friends, going at these challenges. And you know, I'm going to talk more about the end game once I've really experienced it in a separate video, but the beginning of the end game, getting your masterworks, grinding these grandmaster things, is a fun, engaging experience. Sometimes it can be frustrating because there are very hard difficulties, but just Anthem has a certain allure to it, a certain fun factor to it. Flying around and shooting missiles from the air is something that just doesn't get as old as quickly as some other games where you're just mindlessly shooting enemies with a gun. It's a first-person shooter you've done 1,000 million billion times. So just Anthem has some sort of fun factor to it, and I want to still play this game despite its problems. When the audio crashed, it was annoying, but the thing I wanted to do was just restart the game and get right back to it. Right? I didn't want to give up on this game, right? And so that's the real conundrum that a lot of people are facing right now. And the question of, well, should you buy this game? I mean, it's a really hard question to answer. It's more of a question of, are you willing to spend $60 on the fun factor of this game, which again is undoubtedly a great experience, and withstand all these issues, or do you want to hold on a bit and wait until this game gets patched, gets improved, and when it's at a more stable state, hop in? Or do you just think like, hey, this is a $60 AAA game, it should be polished, it shouldn't be having these issues, I'm gonna stick with Apex Legends, which has none of these issues? That's a question that honestly you're going to have to answer based on your personal opinion. Those are my thoughts on the grind from 1 to 30. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, found it informative, found it interesting. If you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Anthem content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you guys want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickCacus. That's linked in the description down below. Again, hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.